The beautiful Duchess, disguised as a man, single-handedly bends the cunning emperor to her will. Originally living in the remote countryside, she was informed one night by a strange man that she was actually the biological daughter of the Duke of Esther. She was immediately taken back to the Duke's residence that very night. Upon arriving at the residence, she learned that the Duke, diagnosed as unable to have more children, couldn't bear to see the family line end. That's why he brought her back from the countryside. However, upon seeing her, he was displeased that she was a girl. Since the family's heirs had always been male, the Duke came up with a terrible idea. He would raise her as a boy and rename her Rosetta. It was then that she realized she had transmigrated into a novel as the devoted male lead disguised as a man. Although Rosetta didn't appear often in the book, her gentle and delicate personality, coupled with an appearance comparable to a lady's, made her the undisputed white moonlight second male lead in the hearts of all readers. Years later, Rosetta had perfectly mastered this body. Under the Duke's strict guidance, she displayed impeccable manners and etiquette. Even standing before the emperor, she wouldn't make a single mistake. Unexpectedly, during this visit, she encountered the villainess of the story, Vivian. The emperor had specially prepared a reception room for her, considering her age. The moment she stepped inside, a teary-eyed, pink-haired little girl crashed right into her arms. But instead of apologizing, the girl heartlessly pushed her away. Rosetta awkwardly scratched her head, completely surprised that the villainous Vivian was such a soft and adorable little girl as child. Vivian was crying her eyes out because she couldn't find the crown prince. Rosetta noticed this, and without hesitation, offered her a handkerchief. Realizing her disheveled appearance, Vivian blushed with embarrassment. After taking the handkerchief, she fled. This scene made Rosetta burst into laughter. Unbeknownst to her, someone hidden in a tree had witnessed everything. Slowly chewing on an apple, he looked at her with a pleased expression. He hadn't expected the viper-like Duke of Esther to have such a gentle child as Rosetta. He casually offered her a piece of advice. You'd better stay away from that crybaby girl. Otherwise, she'll cling to you wherever you go. Before Rosetta could understand, the boy jumped down from the railing. Vivian, hiding behind the door, had seen everything. While talking with the crown prince, Vivian continued peeking from behind the door and was caught red-handed by a maid. After the maid left, Vivian cautiously sat down next to Rosetta, glancing at the beautiful boy from time to time. Amused and exasperated, Rosetta couldn't help but ask, "Do you have something to say?" The next second, the girl, like a startled rabbit, stammered, explaining that the handkerchief was dirty, but she would buy a new one for Rosetta. Rosetta said it was all right. However, Vivian misunderstood, thinking Rosetta found it insufficient, and quickly started counting on her fingers, saying she would buy hundreds to repay her. Only when Rosetta insisted she didn't need any did the girl finally stop. Because her hair was messy, Vivian went to the dressing table to comb it. But her naturally curly hair was so difficult to manage that the more she combed, the messier it became. Finally, she became so frustrated that she started to cry. Seeing this, Rosetta quickly went to her side, took the comb, and gently started combing her hair. This made Vivian overjoyed. However, just then, Rosetta noticed someone with blonde hair peeking in from the window out of the corner of her eye. And that person was none other than the crown prince, who had given her advice earlier. Rosetta was so embarrassed she could dig 3 acres with her toes. But when she turned her head, the figure had disappeared. Finally, it was time to leave. The Duke gave her a look, telling Rosetta it was time to go. But Vivian clung tightly to her clothes, startling both fathers. Vivian's father seemed even more embarrassed. He tried to coax his daughter, but the stubborn Vivian wouldn't budge. Vivian only let go when Rosetta said her clothes were being pulled too tightly and her waist was hurting. Her father then took the opportunity to pick her up, and the two finally returned home. They thought the matter was over. But unexpectedly, Rosetta encountered the little pink-clad girl again the next day during her dance lesson. She was dumbfounded. After all, the teacher only had her as a student. There was no way Vivian could have coincidentally appeared here. She finally understood the crown prince's warning. "So, Miss Vivian, did you follow me here?" The girl looked away guiltily, claiming it was all a coincidence. Rosetta helplessly exposed her lie. Vivian had to admit she had indeed followed Rosetta because she wanted to get closer to her. She had helped her tie her hair, Unlike others, Rosetta didn't dislike her. And there's another important reason, Vivian added. You're so handsome, young master. Rosetta was successfully amused by the girl. Vivian was very different from the one in the novel. It should be all right to improve their relationship a little. She slowly extended her hand to Vivian, intending to become friends with her. Seeing this, the girl unhesitatingly took Rosetta's hand. And just like that, Vivian became Rosetta's first friend in this world. The leftover woman was naturally gifted with healing powers. And the Esther family, inheriting the Neckmanth bloodline, possessed a unique curse power. Rosetta, disguised as a boy, was a genius in the world of curses. Her talent was unmatched. As long as she added power to her words while using it, she could wield the curse power. To better demonstrate it to Rosetta, the Duke raised his hand over a flower and silently thought with her. In the next second, the entire flower lost its life. But when it was Rosetta's turn to demonstrate, she felt waves of excruciating pain through her body. Blood sprayed out with her coughs. The Duke clicked his tongue in disdain and abruptly had a servant take Rosetta away. Looking at the motionless flower, the Duke blamed Rosetta's mixed commoner blood. But the next second, all the flowers in the courtyard instantly withered. A sinister smile crept across the venomous Duke's lips. It turned out Rosetta wasn't incapable, but her power was too great. Rosetta was startled awake the next day. The fear brought by her immense power still seemed to linger around her. Fortunately, the Duke sent a magical tool that could control magic. After that, she could control her abilities flexibly and thus fell in love with the lessons. Because of her outstanding performance at the palace, the Duke granted her the freedom to go out. On the day of her outing, her tutor brought a small child wearing a wolf mask. Because she discriminated against magic, she couldn't see the face behind the mask. But what she didn't know was that the boy had already seen through her disguise. In the noisy and crowded market, the distance between the two was vast. Rosetta gestured for him to come closer, saying she wouldn't eat him. The boy slowly approached, too shy to even reveal his name. Rosetta had no choice but to give him the temporary name Ainu. Looking at the boy's small frame, Rosetta couldn't help but order 2 steaks for him, not forgetting to tease him a little. Such skinny arms. How are they supposed to protect me? I feel like I should be the one protecting Ainu. Hearing this, the boy resolutely declared that he could protect her. Rosetta didn't understand what this declaration truly meant. But after that, she never saw Ainu again. Because, unbeknownst to her, the boy's spirit had completely crumbled. On the day they were supposed to meet, the little girl eagerly threw herself into Rosetta's arms. Because a special guest was coming today, Vivian stammered, unable to speak clearly. Rosetta could guess, even with her toes, that the special guest must be the crown prince. But for some reason, the atmosphere between the two of them was quite awkward. Rosetta tried to lighten the mood, but Vivian just quickly picked up her teacup and turned her head away. After unhesitatingly taking a sip, the teacup slipped from her wrist the next second. The scalding tea turned the young girl's hand bright red. Rosetta stroked Vivian's head, softly comforting her, saying it was all right. She then thoughtfully called a maid for her. But a burning, stinging sensation quickly surged through Vivian. The girl could no longer hold back and burst into tears. At that moment, a burning gaze fixed on the two of them. Rosetta had forgotten about the crown prince, the boy who had repeatedly warned her to stay away from Vivian. Soon, the maid took the burned Vivian away for treatment. In a large reception room, only the two of them were left alone. The crown prince looked at Rosetta with a knowing glint in his eye. I clearly warned you that day to stay away from Vivian, yet you insist on treating her with such care. Rosetta defended herself, saying it was only because they were friends. The crown prince leaned closer to Rosetta, smiling meaningfully. If it were just friendship, Vivian wouldn't have apologized to you that day. And she even said, "Please be my friend." Rosetta immediately thought back to that day. But she hadn't expected Vivian to use those words on the crown prince so quickly. But the crown prince had indeed become interested because of it. A thought struck Rosetta. Could it be that your highness has taken a liking to Miss Vivian? Ever since the three of them attended the tea party together, Rosetta had noticed that whenever she visited Vivian's home, she would always see the crown prince there. Every time she accompanied her father to the palace for an audience with the emperor, Vivian would also appear in the palace at the right moment. It was as if they had some sort of agreement. As a result, the three of them spent more time together and unknowingly became good friends. At first, Rosetta worried that the main storyline hadn't even started yet, and Vivian and the Crown Prince were about to get married, with the story ending with their happily ever after. But after spending more time together, Rosetta realized she had overthought things. Although Vivian and the Crown Prince, Shter, had a good relationship, they mostly bickered when they met. The previous awkwardness had completely disappeared, replaced by utter disdain. "Why do you always make Rosetta tie your hair? What does it have to do with you? Who is it that cried and apologized to me before asking me to be their friend?" Hearing this, Vivian, ignoring her untied hair, immediately slammed the table and jumped up. "That's not true. I was blind back then to like you." This scene made Rosetta rembuju fa pi chila. Startled, the two quickly stopped arguing. Actually, she wasn't angry, just incredibly happy. But this life didn't last long. Rosetta's father died 2 years later in a landslide, so she took over her father's responsibilities. But there were always some rats trying to cause trouble. Not long after the previous duke's death, the extensive Esther clan arrived at the duke's residence en masse. They squabbled before Rosetta over the right to regency. Rosetta remained silent throughout. Only when everyone's expression suddenly changed did she slowly speak. "Although I was born to a commoner, the Esther blood flowing through me is purer than anyone else's. I hear the Pongji bloodline can barely even wilt a flower. Therefore, you're not qualified to be my regent. The previous duke would have executed anyone who betrayed him. But I am different. As long as there is no betrayal, I will give you one chance to repent." After settling the family matters, Rosetta began to worry about the Crown Prince. Because not long ago, the Emperor had passed away quietly. Unlike the cold-blooded Duke, the Emperor had cared for the Crown Prince since he was young. After the funeral rites, Rosetta found the Crown Prince in the pouring rain. Unlike usual, his face was haggard. Rosetta held her umbrella over him. Seeing Rosetta, he managed a weak smile. "Everyone asks about my father, but no one cares about me." At that moment, Rosetta finally understood. The heavy rain was to hide the tears streaming down his face. He threw his umbrella aside. "Vivian used to cry in my arms when she was little. But come to think of it, I've never offered my embrace to your highness. It's all right if you don't cry. I just wanted to comfort you." Hearing this, the Crown Prince buried his head in the crook of Rosetta's neck and wept openly. Suddenly, an umbrella sheltered them both once again. Vivian, her eyes red-rimmed, appeared behind them. No one spoke, letting the grief hang heavy in the rain. Time flew by. In an unknown tavern, people discussed the Empire's 3 great beauties. One of them was the cross-dressing young Master Esther. A greasy, lecherous old man took a perverse interest in her and shamelessly wanted to claim her for himself. But in the next second, the man was slammed onto the table. A magic sword landed at the man's feet. His face instantly paled, because it was none other than the recently feared wolf. Instantly, the tavern's patrons scrambled to escape. The lecherous man crawled to Wolf's feet, begging for his life, saying he had a wife and son, Ainu, to support. Wolf sneered, and a flurry of feathered swords rained down. The man died instantly. Wolf muttered to himself, Ainu, what nostalgic name. After the 4 heavenly kings' funeral, the once inseparable trio never saw each other again. The Crown Prince was busy with his coronation. Rosetta was busy consolidating her control over the Duke's estate. Vivian was busy navigating social circles. Although they still exchanged letters, they could no longer meet as often as they did in their youth. After finishing her intense work, Rosetta could finally rest. She rarely removed the magic tool that concealed her gender. Rosetta, as a woman, was truly stunning. Even her longtime maid was captivated. Because of a need to hide her gender, she rarely removed the disguise. She had to wear the magic tool day after day. However, in recent years, she had acquired more magic tools, and she always had to choose carefully which one to wear. Having finished her work, Rosetta rushed to the palace early in the morning. Arriving, she found the Crown Prince had been working tirelessly for days. Rosetta tentatively asked if he needed help. She had only intended it as a polite gesture, but she hadn't expected to fall for the Crown Prince's ruse. With her maid present, she felt too embarrassed to refuse. So I just had to bite the bullet and take the documents. Suddenly, Vivian burst into the office. Her voice tinged with a hint of grievance. She said, How could you two not call me? Luckily, while shopping, I heard that Duke Esther's carriage had entered the palace. Otherwise, I would have left you two alone. After hearing this, Sturl chuckled. I didn't realize Vivian was so fond of me. The two then bickered as usual. Rosetta, who was looking over the documents, suddenly froze. A severe sandstorm had occurred in one region. She remembered this was the beginning of the novel. Because of his failure to handle this matter, coupled with the villainous Vivian's constant surveillance, Sturl ultimately became a tyrant. But the current situation was different from the book. Could the plot have changed? Lost in thought, she suddenly noticed the two discussing her. Rosetta couldn't help but laugh. You're finally back. You've been frowning this whole time. Rosetta stopped dwelling on it and handed over the documents. Sturl, taking the documents, looked perplexed. Just as the two were at a loss, Vivian raised her hand. She had a solution to their travel problem. Duke Gray had been sending her invitations, which she had intended to decline. But now, Rosetta could accompany her. Rosetta agreed that this was feasible and said she would travel with Vivian. The beautiful Duchess, disguised as a man, became a secret admirer of the Wind Mage. Any remarks unfavorable to the young Duke Esther, Ano would nip in the bud. But whenever the young Duke Esther needed something, he would appear immediately. Not long ago, a severe sandstorm struck the Tyrian region. If it wasn't handled perfectly, Sturl would suffer the double blow of the Emperor's death and public opinion, ultimately becoming a complete tyrant, and many lives would be lost. Rosetta couldn't bear to see such a tragedy unfold, so she decided to take action. Before that, she decided to take advantage of the nightfall and search for the key person who could withstand the sandstorm. With the saint descending from the heavens, the Blackwood from the novel would also appear, but the saint hadn't shown up yet. Time was of the essence. Rosetta couldn't wait, so she had to find the Wind Mage in advance. Although a genius, he was treated as a test subject by the master who raised him. Blackwood brought him immense pain, causing his young mind to completely break down. So, after gaining powerful abilities, the first thing he did was kill his master. However, because his master was a sage of the magic tower, he was subsequently hunted by the magic community. Before meeting the female lead, he had been staying in an inn, the very one Rosetta was standing before. With a nervous heart, Rosetta entered the inn. As soon as she stepped inside, the owner greeted her warmly. Rosetta, without delay, stated her purpose. Suddenly, a scream came from upstairs. The owner grumbled. I knew this would happen. I told them not to gamble with that madman wolf. Following the owner's gaze, Rosetta had a hunch. She strode over. A tall, black-haired man was roaring uncontrollably at a blood-stained table. But upon noticing Rosetta approaching, the man looked her over appraisingly. Are you here to gamble with me too? Rosetta explained that she simply wanted to ask Wolf for a favor. But the man leaned in close, looking down at her condescendingly. Why should I help you? Rosetta thought, a flicker of worry in her heart. She knew Wolf wouldn't help easily. That's why she had prepared for the worst before coming. Just as Rosetta was about to resort to force, Wolf let out a strange laugh. I only do things that interest me, and it just so happens I'm very interested in you. He dropped his flippant demeanor. Without explaining why, he simply stated 10 gold coins up front, and I'll take care of your problem. Rosetta briefly described her request. The task is to dispel the sandstorm raging in the Tyrian region. But that's not a place one can enter freely. Wolf would need to pose as her attendant. Rosetta didn't think he would agree easily. She wasn't confident she could persuade him. But the next second, he unexpectedly agreed. She briefly introduced herself as Rosetta, the new Duke of Esther. Upon hearing this, the man chuckled as if he already knew. Then allow me to introduce myself. My name is... Before he could finish, Rosetta interrupted. I know your name is Wolf. The man paused, murmuring Wolf to himself. Then, with a swift movement, he appeared before Rosetta, his long fingers cupping the back of her head. Then please take care of me, my dear Duke. And so, Wolf became Rosetta's attentive steward. Soon, the group set off for Tyrian. Rosetta had initially worried about his impulsiveness, but now he acted like a perfectly respectable man. Not only did he thoughtfully prepare refreshing ice water, but he truly fulfilled his duties as a steward. Rosetta's impression of him improved, because the three of them had been close since childhood. Even a shared glance, or a smile, would draw whispers and stares. Rosetta was used to this attention. But just as they were about to leave, Wolf silently appeared before her, making Rosetta's blood pressure spike. The banquet is about to begin. You should get ready. Although Rosetta was attending the banquet as Vivian's companion, she had no opportunity to approach Duke Gray. So, she had to find a way to make him come to her. Lady Vivian, may I have the honor of this dance? The girl's eyes sparkled. It would be my pleasure. Just as Rosetta had anticipated, whenever she danced with Vivian, all eyes were on them. Even the incredibly busy Duke Gray immediately broke away to join them. But his attention remained solely on Vivian, completely ignoring Rosetta beside her. Anger surged within her. She stepped between them. Hello, I'm the Duke of Esther. She then slipped the letter into Duke Gray's hand. But after reading it, he feigned ignorance. Rosetta narrowed her eyes. She knew he was lying. So, if possible, before leaving here, I'd like to go to Tillian. Duke Gray waved his hand dismissively, implying that if Rosetta resolved the issue, they wouldn't have to bother. She inwardly cursed him for being an ungrateful wretch. After bidding Vivian good night, Rosetta was about to return to her room when Wolf suddenly appeared behind her. My Duke, please brush my hair. He had disguised himself as a man for 18 years, but the exiled magic wielder saw through her disguise in an instant and ignited a powerful possessiveness in the obsessive madman, all because she had helped Vivian braid her hair. Ano secretly stewed over it for 3 days and 2 nights. It wasn't until 3 a.m. during a break that he finally sought out the exhausted Rosetta and asked her to brush his hair. He even requested the same hairstyle as Vivian. Rosetta was utterly speechless, but to save herself the trouble, she complied with Wolf's request. After his hair was done, the man acted as if he'd tasted honey. After he left, humming a tune contentedly, Rosetta finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep. Little did she know, the man hadn't left at all. After Rosetta fell asleep, he opened the door and gently caressed Rosetta's cheek with his hand, still the same as before. Looking at her sleeping face, memories surfaced. Years ago, he had already seen through Rosetta's disguise. He knew that beneath the appearance of a young boy hid a beautiful young girl. He told everything to Harori, who was beside him, but he was taken away that very night. After meeting his magic teacher, his spirit was completely shattered. Now, he was a monster incapable of feeling any emotion. Yet now, he felt something strange for Rosetta, a feeling completely different from his usual anxiety. Although he didn't know what it was, it felt good. Looking at Rosetta, who had returned to her female form, Ano murmured, "How can I make you remember me?" Rosetta woke up with aches and pains all over. Despite this, she put on a brave face and told Vivian she was fine when Vivian expressed her concern. Wolf, however, was acting strangely today. Vivian noticed that her hairstyle was identical to her own from the previous day, but there was no time to dwell on it, as they had to leave for the source of the sandstorm. Wolf, however, pointed out that Duke Gray had only prepared 2 camels. Time was running out, and they couldn't leave Vivian behind. Wolf offered a suggestion. He proposed sharing a camel with Rosetta while Vivian rode with an attendant. Rosetta thought this was a good idea. Wolf was too dangerous. Vivian couldn't be too close to him. But looking at Wolf's bright smile, Rosetta felt a chill down her spine. After mounting the camel, Rosetta unknowingly leaned against Ano and fell asleep. Noticing Vivian looking over, the man made a quiet gesture. Rosetta didn't wake up until they reached the heart of the sandstorm. She instinctively cried out, "Wolf," and found herself held tightly in his arms. The man, addressed by name, seemed unusually excited. He tightened his grip around her waist. "I haven't received my payment yet. I can't let my employer get hurt." Rosetta noticed that the wind and sand were incredibly fierce around Vivian, yet not a single grain touched her. Knowing this was Wolf's doing, she reassured Vivian, saying she would resolve everything soon. Then, she shouted to the man behind her, "You remember my request, right? You need to deal with that vortex in the center." Hearing this, the man jumped off the camel without hesitation, muttering a strange incantation. He pulled a strange wolf-shaped mask from his pocket. Rosetta's heart skipped a beat. The attire reminded her of someone, her childhood playmate, Ima, who had suddenly disappeared. Rosetta hadn't expected him to be so powerful. After this was over, she would have to question him thoroughly. Unexpectedly, Ano collapsed unconscious. She had no choice but to wait until he woke up. Duke Gray, smiling, invited Vivian to stay a few more days. But Vivian refused without a second thought, demanding compensation for resolving the disaster. She specified the aid of a creature known as a sacred beast. Due to their extreme rarity, Duke Gray initially intended to offer only one. However, under Vivian's pressure, he eventually relented. In the end, Vivian rode one alone, while Rosetta and Ano shared another. Seeing Rosetta exhausted from the journey, Ano gently drew her close, softly saying, "Sleep well. I'll wake you when we arrive." A moment later, Rosetta fell asleep in Ano's arms. Meanwhile, Sturl, the emperor, found his mind constantly disturbed by other matters. He hadn't received any news from Rosetta and Vivian for days, and couldn't focus on his duties. Finally, a letter assuring their safety arrived, lifting the weight of his worries. The next morning, upon waking, Rosetta subconsciously called out for Wolf. Though only a few days had passed, she had grown accustomed to the unreliable steward's presence. As darkness fell, Rosetta had a premonition that the female protagonist was about to appear. Li Yuna, originally an ordinary high school student, had become a revered saintess after traveling through time. Most people admired her straightforwardness, but only Rosetta, having read the original story, knew the trouble she would cause. Sturl and Vivian's current relationship was certainly strong, but if the original plot were to unfold, they would inevitably drift apart due to Li Yuna's arrival. Vivian wouldn't hate someone without reason, so if that day were to come, Rosetta would definitely side with Vivian. One Ano was already enough of a headache. The original story's lead was driven mad by the name Wolf, given to him by the female protagonist. But now, it was Rosetta who had given the name to the person behind the scenes. This led her to speculate that the plot might take an unexpected turn. Regardless, it was best to ask the person in question. Rosetta went to the guest room. Entering, she found Ano lying quietly in bed. Overusing magic had side effects, and he had been unconscious for days. If Rosetta's guess was correct, Wolf had completely accepted Ano as his name. She tentatively called out Ano. In the next second, those green eyes snapped open. He pulled Rosetta, who was standing by the bed, down onto him, looking down at her with an unnatural blush on his face. "What did you just call me? Can you say it again?" But in the next moment, a sword was pressed against his throat. The emperor, unaware that his sworn brother was a woman, felt a surge of jealousy seeing her pinned beneath a strange man. When Rosetta called out the name Ano after so long, the man reacted intensely, pulling her down onto him. His cheeks flushed. "Can you say my name again?" Looking at the crazed man, Rosetta knew this was bad. Sturl had appeared at the doorway at the worst possible moment. Seeing the scene before him, he froze, then quickly drew his sword, pressing it against Ano's throat. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Looking at the blade so close to him, Ano deliberately cut his finger on it, then licked the blood. "And who are you?" Sturl was instantly enraged. He was the emperor, known throughout the empire, yet this person claimed not to know him. Ano simply smiled. "Is there a need for me to know who you are?" Seeing the situation escalating, Rosetta finally decided to intervene. He first told Sturl to stand up and said they should talk things out calmly. Then he told Ano to get off of her. But as soon as Rosetta stood up, Sturl immediately pulled Ano behind him. Seeing this, Rosetta quickly explained, "He's someone I know, Your Highness. There's no need to be so wary." Sturl was still agitated. "He was on top of you just now." Rosetta emphasized that nothing happened. Ano hadn't hit her or threatened her. Besides, it was better to resolve the argument quickly. Otherwise, 3 men in one room could easily lead to misunderstandings. She told Ano to wait there and not wander around. Then she pulled Sturl to the drawing room. After some questioning, she learned that Sturl had originally planned to go upstairs to find Rosetta, but saw the door to the room on the left open. Hearing Rosetta's voice, Sturl went in without a second thought. Unexpectedly, he saw a shadowy figure on top of Rosetta. After hearing this, Rosetta breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, only Sturl had seen it. Otherwise, things would be bad. Even if just a little bit got out, there would be rumors that the Duke of Esther preferred men. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, the Emperor's face darkened considerably. Seeing his last shred of reason about to disappear, Rosetta quickly explained, "What I meant was, 2 men alone together can easily be mistaken for something strange." Hearing this, Sturl suddenly became incredibly embarrassed. He subconsciously touched his burning cheeks. What had he been imagining? What could happen between 2 men? But then again, who was that strange fellow? Sturl had never seen him before. His name is Ano. He helped resolve the sandstorm. Rosetta publicly claimed he was her butler. But according to the original story, Ano and Sturl shouldn't meet so early. She also couldn't reveal Ano's identity as a mage. As Sturl continued to press her, Rosetta could only explain that to resolve the sandstorm, She needed a helper who could use magical tools. That's why she hired him. Sturl said he understood, but he still seemed preoccupied. He presumably had important matters to discuss. So Rosetta said she would compile a report about the incident and submit it to Sturl. Hearing this, he finally seemed relieved. Then I'll go back and wait for your news. But on his way back, that scene kept replaying in his mind. And the more he thought about it, the more it seemed wrong. His sixth sense told him that Rosetta's relationship with that man was unusual. The moment he saw the compromising position, he lost his mind. By the time he came to his senses, he was already holding his sword. Although Rosetta said that the man was just an insignificant nobody, Sturl instinctively felt that the guy was definitely not simple. His eyes were like those of a wild beast facing its prey. Although Rosetta had explained the details, his mood was still terrible. Could it be that he was jealous because his friend had been taken away? After a while, he became convinced of this idea. It must be so. A few days later, at the Imperial Palace, Sturl started asking about Ano again. Rosetta said that he had already left the Duke's residence. Even she hadn't expected him to leave so abruptly. But after reading Rosetta's report, Sturl absent-mindedly asked again, "You won't have any more contact with that shadowy fellow, will you? We won't meet again. Our transaction is over." Hearing this, Sturl was completely relieved. That's great. He's so arrogant. I've disliked him from the start. Rosetta didn't expect His Majesty to dislike Ano so much. Rosetta came this time not only to submit a report, but also to tell Sturl about the succession banquet she would be holding at Esther Castle. This trip was to deliver the invitations. Rosetta was incredibly busy preparing for the banquet. Because there was no mistress of the castle, she had to personally oversee everything. Fortunately, Vivian came to help with the final checks the day before the banquet. Rosetta was finally able to rest for a moment. But just as she was about to remove the bothersome magical artifact, thus she suddenly noticed something was wrong. Her hands had, at some point, returned to their original size. She hurried to the mirror. As she suspected, thus she had unknowingly reverted back to her female form. The beautiful Duke, disguised as a man for 18 years, that had her identity exposed by a sealing spell to completely possess the beautiful young Duke. The man had frantically destroyed all of the magical artifacts she used to hide her gender, even the magic earrings she was currently wearing, that had lost all their magic. Because of this, Rosetta had to drag her exhausted body out and find someone to repair the magical artifacts before the banquet the next day. After some adjustments, Rosetta snuck out of the Duke's residence late at night. Finally, deep within an old alley, thus she stopped. The moment she stepped into the aged building, that the craftsman inside recognized her immediately. It seems a distinguished guest has arrived. The repairman, Shio, began to carefully examine the broken magical artifacts. He noticed some dangerous traces on them. Seeing Rosetta's confusion, the man explained, wherever a mage goes, they leave traces of their magic. These are what we call traces. The magical artifacts I crafted have no inherent flaws. It's just that the person who damaged them possesses overwhelmingly powerful magic. If someone wearing a magic concealing device is still discovered, it means the other person is extremely sensitive to magic. In front of them, no magical artifact will work. Hearing this, Rosetta couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. That meant Ano had seen through her disguise as a man from the very beginning. People sensitive to magic were rare. They were just as their name described. They could see through everything. No magical artifact could fool them. After entrusting Shio with the repairs, a cloaked figure appeared once again in front of the crow-filled Esther Castle. Rosetta thought no one knew she was the one leaving the castle, but she didn't know that her movements had already been observed. The man pouted in dissatisfaction. "Rosetta, she'd rather seek help from anyone else but me. But my Duke will soon be face to face." After Rosetta's figure completely disappeared, Ano transformed into a black crow, and vanished into the quiet sky above the castle. For Rosetta's debut as Duke, Vivian had specially dressed herself up. She had asked her brother and father to prepare some gifts for Rosetta. The girl excitedly fished for compliments, and Rosetta responded with a doting smile. Soon, the banquet hall was overflowing with people. Everyone wanted to get acquainted with the newly appointed Duke. When the crowd around Rosetta dispersed, Vivian eagerly approached, making the tired Rosetta laugh. Following the gaze of most people, a blonde figure was slowly approaching. The newly appointed emperor appeared in everyone's sight. When Sturl presented the gift he had carefully chosen for Rosetta, Everyone watched like an audience at an animal show in a circus. People were gossiping about the unusual relationship between the three of them. Sturl thought they had a point. After all, they were so handsome and popular. It was nice to have good friends around. Rosetta couldn't help but laugh. Sturl and Vivian's arrival had truly relaxed her tense nerves. However, their time together was limited. Vivian and Sturl both had to leave soon. Rosetta didn't plan to stay at the banquet for long either. She soon quietly returned to her room. Night fell. Anna, who had left early in the morning to fetch her magical artifact, had yet to return. The temporary magical artifact Shyoga had given her only lasted for 2 days, so she had to get a new one as soon as possible. Rosetta wanted to go out onto the balcony to clear her head, but the air was filled with the cawing of crows. Crows symbolized misfortune. Rosetta had a premonition. Perhaps the saintess would descend from the heavens the next day. Just then, the crows circling overhead suddenly landed. In the blink of an eye, they transformed into a tall, black-haired man. "Duke, we meet again." Before Rosetta could ask anything, Aino quickly stepped forward. He placed his large hand on Rosetta's cheek. Her heart skipped a beat. She slapped Aino's hand away. "Don't touch me." The man looked aggrieved. "Don't you like it?" He wanted to hear Rosetta call him Aino every day. He wanted to become an indispensable person in Rosetta's life. Rosetta realized that her disguise as a man had been discovered. The words "do you like me" almost slipped out, but then she suddenly remembered that the saintess was about to appear. Aino would soon fall for the saintess. The question seemed redundant, but she still hoped Aino would keep her secret, exposing her as a woman. Seeing this, Aino unhesitatingly took Rosetta's hand. Just then, Rosetta chanted a strange incantation. She placed a curse on Aino. If he revealed her secret, he would die instantly. But he didn't resist at all. Seeing this, Rosetta reiterated, "This is a curse and a promise. If you break this promise, you will die immediately." Unexpectedly, he suddenly blushed. A mark on the heart is a kind of binding. "So, have I become your possession?" He cupped Rosetta's face again. "Can I touch you now?" Rosetta was speechless. She quickly stepped back. "You can leave now." Aino looked back longingly. "It seems the timing isn't right today." He then transformed back into a crow. He disappeared from Rosetta's sight. The three friends from the banquet had agreed to meet the next day. But Rosetta had a hangover and a splitting headache. Vivian, worried, wanted the coachman to stop the carriage. But Rosetta refused. She remembered that in the novel, the saintess seemed to descend from the heavens on a clear day. And today was a clear day. So she wanted to see for herself. As soon as she arrived at the secret base, a figure, just like in the prophecy, descended from the sky. She considered the male lead a good friend, but he had ulterior motives. Although he didn't know Rosetta was a woman, Sturl had carefully chosen a bouquet of flowers in matching colors for her. Even Vivian, who was a girl herself, didn't receive such treatment. She couldn't help but complain, "Your Majesty didn't give me flowers, even though I'm a girl." But he gave them to Rosetta, who is supposedly a man. To this, Sturl replied, "Vivian, it's not good to be so narrow-minded." But as they argued, Sturl's gaze towards Rosetta became increasingly suggestive. But when his eyes met Rosetta's, he masked his expression and turned to present flowers to the only lady present. Vivian couldn't help but complain. While Sturl was very handsome, his personality was rather cunning and deceitful. Rosetta retorted, "Am I not handsome too?" Vivian puffed up her cheeks and insisted that wasn't the case. His Majesty is a handsome man. Rosetta is a beautiful, handsome man. Her rambling made Rosetta burst out laughing. Vivian seemed to have noticed something. She called out to Rosetta, having spotted something approaching in the sky. Rosetta recalled the scene of the saintess's descent from the original story and yelled, "Close your eyes." Sturl followed her gaze and saw a meteor hurtling straight towards them. Rosetta told Vivian it would be all right, because that's how it happened in the book. Sturl would catch the saintess falling from the sky. The surging air pressure forced Rosetta to close her eyes. The ground beneath her feet began to crack. Despite the powerful impact of the saintess's descent, she landed in Sturl's arms as light as a feather. Diana possessed the divine power of the Holy Kingdom's god of light. Sturl possessed the divine power of the ancient god, Harmonia. Rosetta wanted to check on Sturl, but the man remained motionless, his eyes vacant like a controlled puppet. The woman's name was Yuna. On her way to school, she inexplicably fell down a sewer. Her body then plummeted uncontrollably. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself gazing at a man radiating a golden light. While still unconscious, Yuna heard a voice. You answered my call. I summoned you to this world, Queen. Yuna, though unable to understand the voice, seemed to grasp her current situation. A strange smile crept across her lips. Am I a messenger of God? The saintess's descent from heaven made headlines the very next day. The clergy proposed informing the Pope immediately. The high priest also declared he would personally visit the imperial palace. The saintess is a gift from the heavens. We cannot allow the emperor of the Hellies Empire to take her. Sturl was troubled by this. The next day, he summoned all the nobles, including Rosetta. Unlike usual, Rosetta wasn't called to his office, but to the West Castle, reserved for honored guests. Upon entering, she saw Sturl with a grim expression, keeping vigil by Yuna's bedside. Seeing it was Rosetta, his expression finally relaxed. To lighten the mood, Rosetta instinctively joked, "Is your majesty captivated by the saintess's beauty?" But Sturl's expression remained serious. "If I were easily swayed by beauty, I would have been captivated by Rosetta and Vivian long ago." Rosetta inwardly marveled. So even disguised as a man, she was considered beautiful. The sudden turn of events had left Sturl exhausted. Rosetta realized Sturl hadn't fallen for Yuna at first sight like in the novel. Instead, he seemed quite troubled by it. Yesterday, when Sturl looked at Yuna, his eyes were vacant. This morning, they were much clearer. The news of the saintess's descent had spread like wildfire. The nobles in the conference room chattered incessantly. Rosetta, concealing her identity, sighed. Then, she used a silencing curse to shut everyone up. The room became so quiet that only one voice could be heard. Sturl then spoke. "The purpose of today's meeting is to confirm the truth of the rumors, whether or not to send the saintess away. I will decide with Duke Esther and Marquis Good." Thanks to Rosetta's backing, the meeting proceeded smoothly. The nobles didn't dare to criticize him, but the next moment, an attendant rushed in. "The high priest of the Hellies Temple has arrived." Hearing this, Sturl immediately rushed to the West Castle. After Sue opened the door, she saw the saintess lying quietly in bed. The high priest clutched her hand, tears streaming down his face. Sturl's expression was grim. He cursed, "Damn it," and, ignoring Rosetta's protests, snatched Yuna from the high priest's grasp. Brilliant magical light instantly illuminated the entire room. Damn this novel's setting. The high priest held her hand without any change, but the moment Sturl touched her, she radiated light. Although it's mostly consistent with the novel, Sturl hasn't turned evil, and there's no need for the saintess. So why has she still appeared? The young emperor, who has a crush on Duke Esther, is captivated by his appointed official. Whenever Yuna looked at him with loving eyes, Sturl's heart would pound. But only he knew it wasn't love. It was an indescribable, chilling feeling. The moment he touched Yuna, both of them radiated light. Seeing the saintess finally awaken, the priests immediately knelt, but her gaze remained fixed on Sturl. The commoners instinctively began to back away. Only then did the light around them finally disappear. He looked at Rosetta with unease. Rosetta quickly realized something was wrong. Someone who transmigrated should need time to adapt to life here. But Yuna, based on just a few words from the priests, completely accepted everything. Unnoticed by everyone, she gave him an innocent smile. Watching the priests trying to take Yuna away, and remembering how Sturl fell in love with Yuna at first sight in the original story, Rosetta voiced her doubts. "Your Majesty, isn't that a bit odd?" But Sturl simply said he didn't need to be clever. However, at that moment, my initial opinion, and that of the Marquis, is that the saintess should remain in Hellies, he insisted. After all, she fell here. She fell into the ground here. But the priests were not to be outdone. Rosetta couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. A Marquis was no match for him. Seeing Rosetta's distress, Sturl seemed to make a decision. He walked towards Yuna and asked where she wanted to stay, the Holy Kingdom or the Hellies Empire. Yuna lowered her head and said she would follow Sturl's decision. "So, Your Majesty, where do you wish me to stay?" In the end, Yuna stayed in the Hellies Empire. The priests who had come to escort her also stayed. They believed the saintess would eventually change her mind. But Rosetta could see that they didn't just want to stay by the saintess's side. They cursed Rosetta, calling her a jealous, manipulative, and cursed wretch. Rosetta was used to such insults and wouldn't be discouraged. But the emperor couldn't stand it and retorted, "You foul-mouthed, gossiping priests. Could it be of some help to the saintess, Yuna?" He only permitted one priest to act as a tutor. Ridiculous. But the priests relentlessly haggled. Rosetta was exasperated by the incessant bickering. So, Using their own words against them, she demanded self-discipline. This forced these self-righteous individuals to finally shut their mouths. Seeing them speechless, Rosetta's furrowed brow finally relaxed, but the high priest maintained a constant smile. He accepted whatever definition Sturl proposed, and he wouldn't budge. Unexpectedly, in the following days, no matter where he was, Sturl would always encounter Yuna. Whenever Yuna approached him with sparkling eyes or made a request, he felt as if he were being emptied out. Before Sturl could react, his body had already given in, and this bothered him greatly. On the other hand, Rosetta hadn't received a reply for a long time. She was curious about how the Saintess was getting along with Sturl. The original story mentioned that the nation possessing the Saintess would become the century's dominant power. She clearly remembered Vivian interfering when the two were in love. Rosetta feared that the young lord she had raised since childhood would become lovesick again, so she decided to go to the imperial city to gather some intelligence. But the gates were impassable, surrounded by a throng of onlookers eager to see the Saintess. Having finally entered the castle, Vivian immediately rushed over. "Rosetta, I missed you so much." Vivian had originally planned to sneak off to the Duke's castle without her parents and brothers knowing, but she was discovered and confined. Rosetta gently stroked her head, but Vivian insisted she wasn't a child anymore. Seeing this, Rosetta could only act like an adult, looking after the little princess she had pampered since childhood. This was the first time the three of them had been together since the Saintess's arrival. Vivian had been crying her eyes out during her confinement. She was terrified of being abandoned by His Majesty and Rosetta. Out of boredom, she had even unexpectedly discovered a talent for painting. Her haughty demeanor made Rosetta burst out laughing. Vivian's face flushed red. The two playfully bantered. Sturl's face was clouded with worry. "You've been distracted from the very beginning." Sturl tried to deny it, but how could he deceive his longtime friend? "Although it's a bit embarrassing to admit, I had a crush on you for a while. So no matter how you try to hide it, you can't fool me and Rosetta." Sturl couldn't help but smile. He had forgotten that Rosetta had a crush on him for quite some time. Even though Sturl deliberately changed the subject with a joke, Rosetta knew Vivian wasn't doing well. "Does it have something to do with the Saintess?" "Your Majesty, since you summoned us, please tell us what's on your mind." Vivian immediately bristled at the mention of the Saintess. "Rosetta, when did this all start? It's all because of that Saintess. I've been grounded for 7 days and forbidden from leaving the house. Even I couldn't capture His Majesty's heart. The Saintess's influence over him is truly remarkable." Finally, Sturl steered the conversation back on track. "These past few days, I've experienced some strange things. It feels like someone is controlling my body. Especially when I see the Saintess, my heart races uncontrollably.